The Pacific Ocean, 1943. Somewhere above the jungle canopy of Bougainville, the air is still. No turbulence, no clouds thick enough to hide in, just blue, endless, merciless sky. One man is flying north on schedule, precise as clockwork. He has done this before. He trusts the routine. His uniform is pressed, his itinerary classified. He does not know that 18 American aircraft took off before dawn. He does not know they have been flying for over an hour. Low, skimming the ocean surface to stay off radar. Navigating by math alone, no landmarks, no radio signals. Just a lieutenant colonel with a hand-drawn chart and a gut feeling about the wind. Two formations moving toward each other across 400 miles of open water. And neither one can see the other yet. This is not a story about luck. It is a story about a machine that was laughed at, then feared. An aircraft so strange in its design that pilots called it everything from a science experiment to a flying nightmare. The Japanese gave it a name, the Americans gave it a legend. And on the morning of April 18, 1943, both of those things converged over a tiny island at treetop level in the span of a few minutes. What happened next changed the course of the war. The Lockheed P-38, lightning was not supposed to work. When Lockheed's chief engineer Hal Hibbard and a young designer named Kelly Johnson submitted their proposal to the U.S. Army Air Corps in 1937, the aircraft looked like something drawn by a child who had never seen a real fighter. Twin booms, twin engines, a narrow central pod for the pilot, suspended between two fuselages like a gondola hanging from a bridge. It violated almost every design convention of its era. The Army ordered it anyway. The specifications were brutal. A top speed of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, a climb rate that left most contemporary aircraft gasping, and the range to escort bombers across distances that single-engine fighters simply could not cover. The P-38 was designed for a war that had not yet started, against an enemy that had not yet been named. By 1942, that enemy had a face. Japan had struck Pearl Harbor. The Pacific Theater stretched across millions of square miles of open ocean, island chains, and jungle. Conventional fighters ran out of fuel before they reached the fight. The P-38, with its twin Allison engines and internal fuel capacity exceeding 400 gallons, supplemented by external drop tanks, could go where others could not. It was not perfect. Early models struggled at high altitude in European cold. Pilots complained about compressibility dives that made the aircraft feel locked, unresponsive, like pushing against a wall of concrete at 400 miles per hour. The Pacific was different. In the Pacific, the P-38 found its purpose. Kelly Johnson was 27 years old when he started sketching the airframe that would become the P-38. He was not interested in beauty, he was interested in physics. The problem with conventional single-engine fighters was simple. One engine, one point of failure, one set of compromises. You could have speed or range, but rarely both. You could have firepower or maneuverability, but the weight always cost you something. Johnson refused the compromise. He put two engines on the aircraft. Then he had to figure out where to put everything else. The twin-boom configuration solved several problems at once. Each boom housed an Allison V1710 liquid-cooled engine, a turbo supercharger, and a tail assembly. The central nacelle held the pilot, the fuel, and something unusual for its time, a nose-mounted weapons package. 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, all clustered in the nose, firing in a straight parallel line directly ahead. No propeller arc to work around, no synchronization gear introducing delays. What the pilot aimed at, the aircraft hit. In a fighter, that matters enormously. The P-38 entered operational service in 1941. By 1942, it was deployed across multiple theaters. Early combat reports from Europe were mixed. The aircraft suffered from a phenomenon called Mach tuck, where at speeds approaching the sound barrier in a dive, the airflow over the wings became unpredictable. The aircraft would nose over, the controls would stiffen, and pilots found themselves in dives they could not pull out of. Several did not survive the discovery. The Army Air Forces worked on fixes, dive flaps, modified control surfaces. The solutions came, but slowly, and in the meantime, the P-38 developed a complicated reputation. In the Pacific, those problems were less pronounced. The climate was warmer, the missions were different, and the pilots who flew the P-38 in the Pacific learned to use what the aircraft did best: speed, altitude, energy. Major Richard Bong from Poplar, Wisconsin, would eventually become America's highest-scoring ace of the Second World War, with 40 confirmed aerial victories, all of them flying the P-38. Thomas Maguire, 38 victories. Charles McDonald, 27. These were not reckless men. They were precise, patient, disciplined in a way that aerial combat rarely rewards, because most of the time, aerial combat is chaos. But the P-38 was not a dogfighting aircraft. It was never meant to turn in tight circles with a zero. It was meant to arrive with energy, strike hard, and leave before the enemy understood what had happened. The tactic had a name: boom and zoom. Climb to altitude, identify a target below, dive at full throttle, convert that altitude into velocity, attack in a single pass, and then use the remaining speed to climb back up before the enemy could respond. The P-38 could reach speeds in a dive that most Japanese fighters could not match in level flight. The pilots who survived the Pacific learned one rule early: never slow down in a zero's neighborhood. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was extraordinarily maneuverable at low speed. If a P-38 pilot bled his energy in a turning fight, the Zero would eat him. But above 300 miles per hour, the Zero's controls stiffened. Its ailerons became sluggish. The performance envelope that made it deadly at lower speeds became a liability at higher ones. The P-38 pilots exploited this without mercy. By late 1942, the aircraft had earned a different kind of reputation in the Pacific. Not the complicated, ambiguous reputation it carried in Europe. Something harder, something the Japanese named themselves. 2 planes, 1 pilot. The silhouette was unmistakable. Nothing else in the sky looked like it. When Japanese pilots spotted that twin boom shape approaching at altitude, the response was immediate. Brake, dive, run. It was not always fast enough. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was the most important military mind Japan possessed in the Pacific, and he knew it. He had attended Harvard University from 1919 to 1921. He had served as naval attaché in Washington. He understood America in ways that most of his contemporaries did not: its industrial capacity, its stubbornness, its tendency to underestimate opponents until provoked, and then to respond with overwhelming methodical force. He had warned the Japanese High Command before Pearl Harbor. He reportedly wrote that he feared waking a sleeping giant. The attack proceeded anyway. He planned it with devastating precision and then spent the following months watching his prediction come true, ship by ship, island by island. By April of 1943, the strategic situation in the Solomon Islands was deteriorating. Japan had lost Guadalcanal after a brutal 6-month campaign. The Americans were pushing up the island chain with a momentum that felt inexorable. Yamamoto understood that morale was the asset he had left, and morale required presence. He decided to visit the forward air bases himself. The itinerary was detailed. April 18, 1943. Departure from Rabaul at 600 hours. A flight of approximately 315 miles to Balal Island, near Bougainville, aboard a Mitsubishi G4M medium bomber, escorted by 6 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters. Arrival scheduled for 0745. The visit would include inspections of multiple installations. The schedule was exact to the minute. Yamamoto was always exact. The message containing this itinerary was transmitted in Japanese naval cipher JN-25, the same cipher that American cryptanalysts had been reading for months. Station Hypo, the code-breaking unit at Pearl Harbor, intercepted the transmission on April 13th and finished decoding it by April 14th. The message was passed up the chain of command with unusual speed. It reached Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox, who forwarded it to President Roosevelt. The question on the table was stark: act on the intelligence and risk revealing that the cipher had been broken, or let Yamamoto land safely and preserve the intelligence asset. Roosevelt gave the order to act. The mission fell to the 13th Air Force based on Guadalcanal. The target was 400 miles away, too far for any fighter in the American infantry to reach, except one. Major John Mitchell was handed the planning responsibility. He had 18 P-38 Lightnings available. He had a set of coordinates, a departure time, and a very narrow window in which Yamamoto's aircraft would be over land, too low to escape, too committed to its flight path to maneuver. Mitchell sat down with a chart and a pencil. He calculated a course that would keep the P-38s at 50 feet above the ocean, below Japanese radar coverage, for the entire outbound leg. No radio contact, no landmarks for most of the route. navigation by compass heading, airspeed, and elapsed time alone. The intercept point was a stretch of jungle just inland from the southern coast of Bougainville, near the village of Aku. Timing error of more than a minute in either direction, and the mission failed. He briefed his pilots at dawn on April 17th. The mission was scheduled for the following morning. The pilots knew who they were going after. Most of them had been in the Pacific long enough to understand what that meant. Yamamoto had designed the attack on Pearl Harbor. His name carried weight, even among the Americans who had never spoken it aloud before that morning. They checked their aircraft, topped off their fuel tanks with external drop tanks of 165 gallons each to extend their range. Went through their pre-flight procedures with the quiet, deliberate focus of men who understood that the margin for error on this mission was effectively zero. April 18, 1943. Pre-dawn. 18 P-38s lined up on the runway at Henderson Field. The engines turned over. 18 engines humming at low throttle, 50 feet above the water. The Pacific at that altitude is not peaceful. It is loud and relentless, and the spray from the wave tops occasionally catches the windshield. The pilots held their formation in silence. No radio chatter, no course corrections called out loud. Mitchell had briefed the route so thoroughly the night before that nothing needed to be said. They flew southwest first, then turned northwest, then adjusted again. Each leg timed to the second on Mitchell's watch. The external drop tanks added drag. The aircraft felt heavier than usual, slower to respond. Pilots kept their hands light on the controls. Any aggressive input at 50 feet above open ocean, with no horizon reference and no margin for error, could be fatal before the mission even started. They were not conserving fuel, they were conserving everything. 2 P-38s turned back early with mechanical trouble. 16 remained. For over an hour, there was nothing to see but water and sky. Mitchell checked his watch, checked his heading. Did the arithmetic again in his head. The intercept point was a stretch of jungle just inland from the southern coast of Bougainville, near the village of Aku, where the terrain forced low-flying aircraft into a predictable approach path. If Yamamoto's bomber was on schedule, and if Mitchell's navigation was accurate, both formations would arrive at roughly the same moment. There was no way to verify either assumption from 50 feet above the ocean. At approximately 0930, the coast of Bougainville appeared on the horizon. Mitchell brought his formation up to altitude, just enough to clear the tree line. He scanned the sky to the northwest, the direction from which Yamamoto's aircraft would approach. Nothing. 30 seconds. Still nothing. Then Lieutenant Doug Canning's voice broke radio silence for the first time since takeoff. Bogies. 10 o'clock high. 2 dark shapes descending. Behind them, the tight formation of 6-0 escorts. Mitchell's navigation had been accurate to within 1 minute. The shapes resolved into Mitsubishi G4M bombers, the type the Americans called Betty, long-range twin-engine, designed for exactly this kind of transit flight. Both aircraft were finished dark green above, gray beneath, standard IJN transport camouflage. They were flying at about 4,500 feet, descending toward the coastline, exactly on schedule. Yamamoto was in the lead aircraft. Mitchell's plan split the force immediately. Captain Tom Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber led the attack flight, 4 aircraft down low, cutting across the jungle to intercept the bombers before they reached the coast. The remaining 12 P-38s climbed hard to engage the Zero escort and prevent interference. The 4 attackers pushed their throttles forward. The gap closed at combined speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. The jungle canopy blurred beneath them. The bombers grew in the windshield. The Zeros reacted, breaking formation, diving toward the attackers. But the P-38s were already committed, already accelerating past the point where a turning engagement was possible or necessary. Yamamoto's pilot saw them coming. He pushed the nose down, trying to reach the tree line, trying to make the aircraft harder to track. He was good at his job. He was not fast enough. The distance collapsed. Tom Lanphier pulled hard left to engage the diving Zeros above him. Rex Barber went straight for the lead bomber. This is where the historical record becomes contested, and it has stayed contested for decades. Lanphier claimed the lead bomber. Barber claimed the lead bomber. Post-war analysis of gun camera footage, Japanese wreckage reports, and witness accounts has generally favored Barber's account. But the official record acknowledged both men, and the argument outlived most of the participants. What is not contested is the outcome. Barber closed on the lead G4M from the rear, slightly below, and opened fire with the nose package. 4 50 caliber machine guns and the 20mm Hispano cannon fired simultaneously. No synchronization lag. The full weight of the weapons converging on a single point. The G4M's right engine caught. The aircraft did not explode immediately. It began trailing smoke, losing power on one side, the pilot fighting the asymmetric thrust, trying to keep the nose from yawing into an unrecoverable roll. The jungle was close, 50 feet, 30. The aircraft was not going to make the coast. It went into the trees. Barber did not watch it go down. He was already pulling up, already accelerating, already checking his mirrors for the Zeros that were now somewhere behind him. The P-38 climbed back to altitude with the speed it had accumulated in the attack run, trading velocity for height exactly as the tactic demanded. The second bomber had broken away, heading toward the water, trying to reach the coast and the relative safety of Japanese-controlled airspace. Lieutenant Besby Holmes and Lieutenant Ray Hine went after it. Holmes fired. The bomber's engines smoked. It made it to the water but came down hard in the shallows near the coast, where the destroyer Harusame later recovered survivors, none of whom were high-ranking personnel. Above the jungle, the Zero escorts were fighting the 12 P-38s Mitchell had positioned for exactly this purpose. The engagement was brief and violent. The Zeros were maneuverable, but the P-38 pilots refused to slow down, refused the turning fight, kept their energy up, made slashing passes, and climbed away before the Zero pilots could bring their guns to bear. Lieutenant Ray Hine was hit and went down, the only American aircraft lost in the engagement. The Zeros claimed no additional P-38s. The whole engagement lasted less than 5 minutes from first contact to last gun fired. Mitchell reformed his surviving aircraft and turned south, back toward Henderson Field. The drop tanks had been jettisoned early in the engagement. Fuel was tight. There was no celebration on the radio. The men flew in silence, same as they had come in. Only when they were clear of Bougainville did someone key a microphone. "Positive results," Mitchell transmitted. That was all. Back in the jungle, a Japanese search party located the wreckage of the lead G4M several hours later. Yamamoto had been thrown clear of the aircraft. He was found in his seat, still upright, one white-gloved hand gripping the hilt of his katana. The Japanese High Command suppressed the news for over a month. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, mid-morning, April 18th. The P-38s came back one by one, low on fuel, some with combat damage. Ground crews counted the aircraft as they taxied in. Of the 16 that had continued past the mechanical aborts, 14 returned directly to Henderson Field. Holmes, low on fuel, diverted to the Russell Islands and arrived later. The pilots climbed out of their cockpits and said very little. Mitchell filed his after-action report with the precision he had applied to the mission itself. Contact time, attack angles, observed results, losses. The report went up the chain immediately. Within hours, the intelligence community at Pearl Harbor had confirmation of what the gun cameras and eyewitnesses suggested. Yamamoto's aircraft had gone down in the jungle northwest of Bougainville, near Aku. The question of what to do with that information returned. If the Americans announced the mission, Japan would know their cipher was compromised. If they stayed silent, they preserved one of the most valuable intelligence assets of the Pacific War. They stayed silent. The cover story, when it eventually surfaced, suggested that a coast watcher, an Australian civilian operating behind Japanese lines, had spotted Yamamoto's flight and passed the information to American forces. Japan announced Yamamoto's passing on May 21, 1943, 33 days after the mission. A state funeral followed. Emperor Hirohito issued a rescript. The Japanese public, who had been told for months that the war was proceeding favorably, absorbed the news of their greatest admiral's passing without knowing its full implications. The full implications were significant. Yamamoto had been irreplaceable in ways that went beyond his tactical competence. He was the one senior officer who had both the strategic vision to understand Japan's long-term vulnerability and the institutional authority to be listened to. His replacement, Admiral Minichi Koga, did not carry the same weight, did not command the same loyalty, and was himself lost on March 31, 1944, when his aircraft went down in a typhoon near the Philippines. The P-38 continued flying. Bong reached 40 confirmed victories by late 1944. Maguire pushed hard behind him. 38 confirmed, before he went down on January 7, 1945, over Los Negros Island in the Philippines, attempting a low-speed defensive maneuver to protect a wingman in a P-38 that had jettisoned its drop tanks and lost energy, in exactly the kind of turning fight the aircraft was never designed to win. The aircraft itself served until the end of the war and beyond, in reconnaissance variants, in photo mapping roles, in training commands. Lockheed built 10,037 of them across all variants. The Japanese nickname stuck. 2 planes, 1 pilot, descriptive, accurate, stripped of emotion. The other name, Fork-tailed Devil. The one reportedly given by enemy pilots has a murkier origin. Historians have found no contemporaneous Japanese or German primary sources using it. It appears, most likely in American wartime propaganda, a story told about the enemy's fear, rather than a documented fact of it, which makes it, in a way, more interesting. Not what they called it, what we needed them to have called it, what we needed the story to be. Yamamoto understood, before almost anyone else on his side, that Japan could not win a prolonged industrial war against the United States. He was right. The man who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor spent the following 2 years trying to manage a strategic situation he had described in advance as unwinnable. He flew to forward bases to raise morale. He kept to his schedules. He trusted his cipher. He trusted it once too many times. The 16 men who flew that morning were not heroes in the theatrical sense. They were technicians, trained, precise, and given a specific problem to solve. The problem was the schedule on a decoded message and 400 miles of open ocean between themselves and the intercept point. Mitchell solved it with a pencil and a chart. There is no clean meaning to draw from what happened over Bougainville. One side had better intelligence. One side had a machine with the range to act on it. One man had planned his morning with enough predictability to become a target. War rewards precision. It also rewards luck. And sometimes, for one side, the two things arrive at exactly the same moment, in the same patch of jungle sky, at 0934 on an April morning. The P-38 flew home. The jungle kept the rest.